What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
I will introduce myself. My name is Sanjay Nath. I'm normally based in Toronto, but fortunately or unfortunately, I'm actually in Kansas City, Missouri. Just spoke for an event, and I am here in, rallying Kansas City Chiefs. Woot woot. Ironically, one of our co-hosts, who's normally with us, Richard Haddon, is not here because he's working, but he's working in Kansas City as well. And him and I are having dinner tonight in Kansas City. So I'm based out of Toronto. My area of specialization is performance and leadership. I'm a speaker and author. Excited to be here.
By the way, I think that Ashley would like to join you guys for dinner tonight. So if she can make the 2-hour drive, so he can't hear us. So I'm just gonna forget about interacting with you today. So, and the other thing is, when you see me post something, I'm posting as Richard Haddon because Richard is the one who's usually in charge of starting the webinar. So I had to log in as him today. So that's who you're going to see in the chat box. Let me introduce my guest because I'm very excited to get to our program. Bonnie Artman-Fox is a workplace conflict expert, Amazon #1 best-selling author. Her book, which I've got over somewhere on my bookshelf, How Did My Family Get in My Office? I'll never forget when you were naming that, Bonnie. I couldn't figure out. There it is. Thank you. Keep it up there. Surprising ways your upbringing impacts you at work and what you can do about it. So Bonnie will tell you later on how you can get a copy of that if you're interested. She brings decades of experience as a psychiatric nurse. Sanjay, there's hope for you. Licensed family therapist and leadership coach to guide leaders to healthy interpersonal skills. As an accredited boss whisperer, I love that. That's actually trademarked. So I want to know more about that. Your listeners will receive a framework of, everyone today will receive a framework of how to intervene with high-performing employees who exhibit abrasive behavior and stop dysfunctional behaviors from undermining your work culture. Bonnie, welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Woohoo!
I want to give you a high five down the street because Bonnie's also located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So we can gang up on Sanjay. So.
And we'll try not to hold that against her.
We can hear you now.
You can hear me and I can hear you. So I just headphone.
Perfect.
Magical. So if I could just sort of jump in and ask this, you are an expert on abrasive leaders. And when I hear that, I think of the term bully. And before, sort of in our pre-call, you were making a distinction between abrasive leaders and bullies. So can you elaborate a bit on that for our listening and viewing audience?
Absolutely, would happy to. And by the way, thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. It is truly an honor. I've known Jeff for several years here through the Pittsburgh National Speakers Association chapter and have always appreciated our collaboration. So thank you, Jeff, for the invitation.
Thanks,
in response to your question, the behaviors of bullying and abrasive leaders are very similar. The distinction that I make is the intent. Oftentimes bullies intend to cause harm, that they have a target, versus abrasive leaders genuinely, and I say this with all due respect, they genuinely lack self-awareness of how they're coming across. And they are driven by the fear of coming across as incompetent. And again, I want to emphasize the impact is the same of bullying and abrasive behavior. So sometimes it's not about getting in the weeds of what the label is. It is just truly my distinct honor to work with abrasive leaders because change is possible. And that's what I want to convey to your listeners is there is hope.
Let me just say, why don't we ask our viewers, so do you have an abrasive boss, yes or no? No, I'm kidding. You can't do that. I'm just kidding. We might get in trouble. So, go ahead, Sanjay.
I was going to ask, I know you do some work and some coaching and stuff you offer as well. Do you offer anything around abrasive co-hosts?
Well, maybe that's why Jeff invited me on this call today.
Mike's not here.
The truth is coming out.
Mike's not here today, so but let's stay on that topic. So abrasive leader, you work mostly, I know, with executives, correct, in an organization, training and coaching. And I'm curious if it matters when we're talking about abrasive leader, if it matters their title, their position. So obviously an abrasive CEO, I think, is a lot different than an abrasive director of marketing. But how does that, because we talk about culture, how does that affect the organizational culture?
Oh, it takes the culture down. And here's the nuance that is so key about intervening with an abrasive leader. Typically, an abrasive leader is a high performer that has expert industry knowledge and makes the company a lot of money. The hesitation of intervening with the abrasive leader as a top performer at that high level is the fear of them leaving and taking their expert knowledge and revenue generation with them. It's so important that the manager of that abrasive leader has basically the backbone to intervene,
Right.
in order to protect the organizational culture, knowing that what behavior is tolerated is what will be the ripple effect throughout the entire culture.
Right.
So it does take the strength of the manager of that abrasive leader to intervene.
And we've talked on past episodes about behavioral standards, having a written, what's expected of our employees. And what I found with organizations that I've worked with sometimes is that, that applies to our employees, not to us as leaders. And it's like, are you serious? Where did that come from, right?
Yeah.
So let's kind of jump right into it, and it also piggybacks off Carol's comment. So what do? I have an abrasive leader, and I'm afraid of him or her, or and it's maybe not even from a company standpoint, but just from my own job security standpoint. What do? Am I going to Indeed looking for a job? Do I, what is the 3-step process?
And let me clarify your question. Are you asking as an employee if you have an abrasive leader, or are you asking as a manager you have an abrasive leader that you manage?
Okay, so I was actually asking as an employee, but both are great questions, and I'm sure people on the call would like to hear the answers to both.
Okay. So first I'll answer from the perspective of the manager of the abrasive leader, because that's the person who has the authority to intervene. The manager would come alongside that person, and I firmly believe in bringing out humanity and saying, I genuinely care about you and your success here at the company. I want to bring to your attention the negative perceptions that coworkers have of working with you. And I'm bringing this to you because if people had negative perceptions about me, I would want to know. And I'm doing that courtesy, the same for you. And here at our organization, we are all about creating a healthy work culture. And we want to help you turn these behaviors around. They're not acceptable, and we want to offer you help. Now, that help might be in the form of a mentor in the organization. It might be in bringing an outside coach in who specializes in working with abrasive leaders. There can be a whole spectrum of what that help is. Why getting help is so important is because typically when the manager of the abrasive leader does intervene, there's often the defensiveness of, what are you talking about? People are too sensitive. People are lazy. They don't want to work. You weren't there. You don't know what happened. And that's the lack of awareness that the abrasive leader has about their behavior and how they come across. That's why offering motivation of saying, this can't go on. We expect you to turn these behaviors around, and we want to help you, is so important, because oftentimes managers have that conversation, but the leader can't turn it around because they genuinely lack the self-awareness of how they're coming across.
Mm-hmm.
Having the expectation and the consequence, something will happen if this behavior doesn't improve, is so key. A leader, a manager, and I'm distinguishing here, the manager of the abrasive leader, the manager has to be willing to follow through on consequences. Now, those consequences might be a demotion. It may be an extreme termination, it may be a change in role. There can be a whole spectrum of what those consequences are. But just like in parenting, as you both know, you can't set an expectation with a child or with an employee and not follow through. So that's answering the one question. I'll
Yeah.
stop there before I answer
Well,
your.
let's go back to, because this is Carol's asking, I believe, Carol, and correct me if I'm wrong, as an employee now. So now an employee, how do you initiate a conversation with an abrasive leader to bring them to awareness of the behavior and how it's affecting employees? And also Eleanor's comment, and what happens if the manager is really weak? So I guess they're two different questions. So,
And hold on, before we jump into those two questions, I just want to go to the actual original question you answered, because you were saying, and that makes a lot of sense, you're going to get a lot of backlash. Oh, you weren't there. Oh, they're too weak. Oh, they're all wimps. Oh, political correctness, whatever. Because you've been in the trenches there, what's your guess on the estimate? Like, does anyone ever actually say, you know what, I think you have a good point, help me? Or basically, that's the standard response you're going to get. That's what you should expect.
Well, just like all of us, we can have a spectrum of self-awareness, and some leaders are appreciative of that feedback and say, thank you, I didn't realize, I'm going to work on that. Would you please continue to give me feedback? And so that's the ideal. Boy, we wish everybody was like that.
fairy tale.
Yeah. But more so, especially on a very high level with the pressure that executive leaders are facing today, that there oftentimes is the defensiveness and the denial of the extent of how they're coming across.
So can an employee approach an abrasive manager?
It's risky.
Uh-huh.
I would say it depends on the relationship that you have with your boss.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is one of a positive rapport and they genuinely sense you care about them, you want to help them succeed, you are there to help them succeed, they may be receptive. Okay. It's risky though, because these leaders are so guarded and so much want to appear, they want to be competent, and anything that is perceived by them to be a threat to their competence is likely to get a very defensive response.
Yeah.
So that's why I offer that it's risky.
The irony is that they're trying to look strong to be strong, and by looking strong in that way, it actually weakens who they are. So yes. it is kind of a bit of a ass backwards kind of approach, but logically it makes sense that to not do it, but emotionally it's a different thing, right? We want to stick out our chest and go, look how tough I am, and I'll yell at you and show you who's boss.
Right.
Jenny brings up a good point. I'll put in a plug for a past episode we had on psychological safety. Bonnie, from your observations of working with these organizations, if we have a lot of leaders on the call, what one piece of advice would you give them to create that environment of psychological safety where it's okay, to have those conversations?
And again, because there are so many.
Who are we talking about?
I want to make sure I'm answering your question. Is this still as speaking to the manager of the abrasive leader? This is
speaking to the manager of the abrasive leader. Yes, I was thinking more of we're leaders who have an abrasive manager. So I'm talking now is what advice would you give a leader who might have an abrasive manager, and in general, I guess, in the culture, creating that environment of safety.
I'll give you an example of a recent organization that I worked with that.
Can you tell us the name too?
No. The executive leader, is the president, and the COO contacted me and said, we have worked so hard to create a healthy work culture. And they are personally working on themselves. They're involved with mastermind groups. They do their own personal development, and they have a very good rapport with this one leader who's been with the organization a long time, who has expert knowledge, has had several conversations with the leader about how their behavior is off-putting and making inappropriate comments. Promised that there would be improvement, and the abrasive leader wasn't able to change. They then intervened and brought me in and said their intervention conversation was, we care about you, we want you to be successful, and we want to invite you to participate in this coaching. The coaching is up to you. It's a choice. We're not going to make you do this. If this behavior doesn't turn around and the negative perceptions about your behavior continue, something is going to happen. The leader agreed to participate in coaching and initially, of course, was defensive. My first meeting with him, and I'm responding to, I think it's Carol's question about how I initiate the conversation with the abrasive leader at my first meeting. I say, I don't work here. I consider me your co-researcher for us to investigate and understand what are these negative perceptions that employees have of, or coworkers have of working with you. And let's identify what they are and let's get to the root of them and develop strategies to turn them around. And he was still guarded. We started out on the coaching process, and part of that process is then him giving, or the leader giving me permission to interview a few of their coworkers to get, basically it's a 360, to identify the strengths of working with that leader as well as the struggles. And I compile that into a feedback summary, taking out all identifying information and giving this report, the feedback summary, that only the abrasive leader reads. This is not for the executive leadership team. This is the way that they build trust with me. And we go through that document that is oftentimes up to 20 pages long, that includes their strengths, but it also outlines the themes of the negative perceptions of working with them.
I love that you say co-research, by the way. Sorry to interrupt, but I think that's a great way to approach it versus let's find out why they don't like you.
Right.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Then we sit down, and as you can imagine, it's a tough conversation, and we go through it line by line. It takes about 2 hours. And more often than not, the response is, I had no idea how I came across. This isn't the person I want to be. And then we start the coaching. And I can share with you now, I've just wrapped up working with this leader, that the executive, the president, has recently said to me, this is a totally different person. And we have not only retained a valuable employee, we have retained other employees who were suffering as a result of this leader's behavior. Right. And this leader is also telling us how his personal life has improved with his family as a result of this coaching. Yeah,
because he could be a very talented person at what he does, right?
They are.
Right.
They are. Right. That's why I say, I want to have hope, convey hope, that these are sensitive, caring people, conscientious. They really want to do a good job. And they genuinely lack the self-awareness. But the coaching program has an 82% success rate of helping leaders transform from abrasive to emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's all rooted in the value of what's important to them. So, for example, if someone cares about promotion, and I'm giving a very superficial example, and you can attach that, hey, you're being perceived as a monster, and that's going to hinder your potential to be promoted. And when you can kind of make those connections, they go, oh, because you can supersede the abrasive behavior with something that's more important to them. And then attach going, this is not helping you achieve this higher value, whether it's recognition or culture or money or fame or fortune. What doesn't matter what it is, but the underlying philosophy is, hey, it's not about how you're doing it. You're trying to get to a destination, and right now the path you're taking is not serving your cause. So if we're willing to open up and change your perspective, your perception, and look at it from a different angle, you can get to where you want quicker. And not only that, but you're going to have more support from the sidelines as well.
Yes, and I really can't emphasize enough, the abrasive leader has to believe their manager will follow through if they don't change, because they don't always believe that their way isn't the right way.
So it's the carrot and the stick.
That's right.
I'm a firm believer that, again, just like with parenting, that it's more about humanity and empathy and being calm, having that backbone to intervene and not showing any angst or anxiety, speaking in a very matter-of-fact way of when you are intervening with that abrasive leader, and saying what you just said, Sanjay, but being aware you've got to have the backbone to follow through, and they got to know you've got the backbone,
Yeah.
because otherwise they won't believe you that you'll follow through.
By the way, I have to put in one more plug, and that is we have a guest speaker. Sanjay doesn't know this yet, coming up in June on how to have difficult conversations. So I think it ties in so well to what you're talking about. Carol asked, do they often realize that that's how they are behaving in their personal life too?
No, they will tend to blame other people.
Well, I can see how this can help though, right? In both personal and professional.
Yes.
So I have to go back because I got to ask you, what's a boss whisperer?
Well, this goes back to why I got into what I'm doing. I have the background as a psych nurse, as a marriage and family therapist, and I got into this work partly because I had an experience early on in my own life of working in a dysfunctional workplace. And I was bound to determine I am going to learn the skills of how to stay. And I sought the help of a mentor who then taught me how to handle this dysfunctional workplace. So I had that experience firsthand of the suffering, the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the stomach upset as a result of working in a dysfunctional place. Then I went on to become a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I saw people in my office who were coming in with stomach aches, headaches, anxiety as a result of a dysfunctional workplace. And I saw the suffering. So that was roughly going on 11 years ago, when I was at a crossroads in my career. I was moving from Chicago to Pittsburgh, and I was deciding, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to continue my work as a therapist, or what else can I do based on what I'm seeing? And that's when I chose to go into leadership coaching, but not just the generic, I guess, if you will, leadership coaching. I wanted to help solve this problem of abrasive leaders and stop the suffering that employees go through. So I sought out then what is a specialized program to work with abrasive leaders. I didn't know one existed. And I came upon the Boss Whispering Institute. And it was founded in 2009 by Dr. Laura Crawshaw, who has done the research of developing this model of boss whispering. And it is a specialized coaching program to work with leaders who are perceived to be abrasive and equipping them to develop interpersonal skills. Wow. And as I said, it has an 82% success rate. And I also want to put a plug in for Laura, because she just recently published a book called Grow Your Spine and Manage Abrasive Leadership Behavior, a guide for those who manage bosses who bully. So this is a great resource, and she walks you through, as a leader, how to develop, how to intervene with abrasive leaders.
What's her name again? Laura
Crawshaw. And she is the founder of the Boss Whispering Institute.
Can you spell it? I'm going to put it in the.
Sure. CRAWSHAW.
So you've alluded to it a couple of times, which is, I think, a really, really important aspect of the ripple effect of the abrasive leader. So if someone has, an abrasive leader and they think, well, I can suck it up, I'm only going to be here another year, or I'm going to retire, or it's not that bad. They can deal with it, but it's not only about them, because you said the case study you told about how they were able to retain a bunch of other people that were either dissatisfied, and that dissatisfaction can lead to turnover, which is costs of the company, all that other stuff. There's a major ripple effect. It's not only, oh, I can suck it up. It's, you may be able to, but can other people? And doing that actually improves the culture. And not only that, you also embed an army by showing that someone can transition and go from being abrasive to being unabrasive. What's the opposite of abrasive?
Emotionally
Singing Kumbaya.
Civilized.
Okay. Civilized. But it shows that even if there is trouble in paradise, you can overcome it if there's a willingness. So there's nothing wrong with having blips of cultural ickiness. The question is, how do you deal with it when you do have it? And that's the real beauty of a strong work culture.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what these executive leaders did, that they said, we have worked so hard to create a healthy work culture. And as valuable as that employee was and is, they were also willing to say, you know, if this doesn't work out, we're going to have to look at other options. Absolutely. And to your point, that they had already had 2 employees who had left, and this leader's behavior had contributed to why they left. So they knew there was a lot at stake with the cost to the organization from an employee turnover perspective, and the brand reputation of the organization, that getting it out on the street that, hey, this is a company that allows abrasive behavior.
By the way, Greg is our resident researcher, and put in the comments, he put a link to Boss Whispering. So, but I want to go back to a question that Carol asked, because we're always trying to help our guests self-promote, so perfect time to do it. But 2 questions: how do companies find you, and what's the title of the person in the company who typically reaches out? Is it HR? Who is it?
It is HR. Thank you for asking. It is HR, but with all due respect, oftentimes HR doesn't have the authority to hire me. They will contact me to inquire about my services and then pass on my information to the executive leadership team, who makes the decision to hire me. I am speaking if anyone is in Pittsburgh on March 28th, I'm speaking at the Pittsburgh Human Resource Association Academy about this topic, solving the problem of abrasive leaders. So that is one way that I am trying to spread the word out to HR professionals. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the other question.
Yeah, we have another question. Greg also not only our resident researcher, but he's our guy who colors outside the lines, and asked a question in the Q&A, which is really unusual. So I know. So I want to ask you, Bonnie, he asks, how is this different than 360-degree feedback? Isn't abrasiveness just one of a multitude of leadership issues or concerns?
It could be, yes. The interview process of interviewing coworkers that, again, the abrasive leader gives me permission to interview, as well as confidential add-ons from the executive leadership team, so that in compiling the feedback summary, the abrasive leader doesn't know who said what. I work diligently to take out identifying information. And I specifically give examples and identify themes of abrasive behavior, because again, more often than not, the abrasive leader genuinely doesn't realize what they're doing, that they're perceived as abrasive. So examples of themes may be public humiliation, and then actual examples, again, taking out identifying information of what the leader did to public, as an example of that theme of public humiliation. Another theme may be favoritism. Another theme may be condescension. Another theme may be overreactive. There's often one that's coming up more and more about the differential treatment about different generations. So there's to answer your question, I believe it's the specificity of this feedback that really identifies the specific behaviors the leader is doing that exemplify the abrasive behavior.
Have you come into issues around? I think we're very much into an overly politically correct society, right? So someone who's very saying something in jest that normally 95% of the time would be considered lighthearted, not a big deal, but then you get that 5% who are like, oh, made fun of I was having a bad hair day and made fun of my hair. Oh, he's evil and all that. So how do you draw the line? Because I mean, I guess it's abrasive if someone believes it to be abrasive, right? Because if the culture is we curse and swear at each other and that's just the norm, and no one considers it to be abrasive, it's not abrasive. But at the same time, you have this line to walk, and it's also two different signals. It's the sender and the receiver. So how do you play in that space?
Yeah, that is a great question. There is a distinction, like we said earlier about bullying. There's a target, there's a pattern of targeting a person, and then there's the abrasive that it can be similar, but the intent. And then there's just good old-fashioned conflict of just differences. And it's having that conversation to really tease out what is happening here. And another key would be looking at the pattern of negative perceptions, that if an HR professional or the manager of the abrasive leader is getting a pattern of complaints about this leader's behavior, then that would be a red flag about the pattern. I love this quote by Henry Cloud. He's an organizational psychologist. He says, the problem isn't the problem. The problem is the pattern.
Right. So
Yeah, I actually, sorry, I would say I follow the similar rule. If as a speaker, promise you, if you're on stage enough, no matter what you say, you're going to offend someone. You say, "Oh, the cat was cute," and that's someone has an issue with that, or the cat was ugly, and someone has an issue with that. So my rule was a rule of three. If someone complained about something and I didn't think it was minor, I would wait for 3 people to complain about it. Then I would be like, all right, maybe something near here needs to change.
Yes, 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 yeah.
so yeah, that was going to be my question. When does conflict rise to the level of abrasiveness? Like, who determines that?
There are 5 character, I guess, classic symptoms or behaviors, abrasive behaviors: overreactive, over control, public humiliation, condescending, and threaten.
Hey, Jeff, she described you to a T.
Nice.
So
And
those would be, I mean, that can be, a variation, and certainly others, but those are the categories of the 5 most common abrasive behaviors that we see that the leader is genuinely unaware of.
yeah, put you on the spot. Overreactive, over-controlled. I missed one. Condescending and threatening.
Public humiliation.
Okay.
So
Thank
yelling at employees at a staff meeting.
Yeah.
Sadly, I had another recent example of a colleague who, with good intent, had done something, and this leader misinterpreted the intent. Instead of going to check it out as any reasonable leader would do and say, tell me about this, what were you thinking, what led you to do what you did, immediately went into attack mode in front of others. And not only was it an overreaction of this abrasive leader, it was a public humiliation of my colleague, and even threatening of this person's job. It sadly, that's a common occurrence of an abrasive leader. I want to go to something I saw in the chat about that. Carol asked, how do you get employees to trust you enough to speak honestly about an abrasive leader? My experience in taking surveys at work where they say they are trying to improve the culture is that employees are afraid the survey isn't truly anonymous. Yeah, thank you, Carol, for that question. When I meet, there's probably a few things that help. First of all, the employees know that they get an invitation directly from the abrasive leader to talk with me. So they know the abrasive leader genuinely wants to get feedback about what they're doing that they have blinders to, that they don't realize how they're coming across. And that helps the employee know and respect the abrasive leader that, wow, I admire their courage to participate in this program. And when I meet them with the employee face to face, I often hear that. Two things. I am grateful that the leader was willing to participate in this coaching and willing to receive help, and that I work for an organization that recognizes the suffering that we as employees are going through as a result of this leader's behavior. And then when I meet with the employee, I share with them, everything you share with me is confidential. I work very hard to take out identifying information, and I will check this out, that if I word it this way, is this okay with you? And them knowing of how stringent I am about taking out any identifying information helps lower their anxiety and to trust that and to participate. I have never had an employee who wasn't willing to participate in the interview.
Wow.
Now, also, that I let them know at the initial interview where I compile the feedback summary, I let them know I will be touching base with you about midway through the coaching as a pulse check, and check in with you again. Are you seeing improvement? Are we on the right track? Are there any other concerns that have come up since we initially met? And again, more often than not, the employee that I initially interviewed tells me, I'm having a totally different conversation with you.
Wow. So, but I'm going to use but because I can't think of how to use and in this case. But if I'm the employee, I'm thinking, we're talking about Sally, my boss, my manager, and there's only 10 of us in our department, and I'm talking about a specific incident. Sally's going to know for sure who said it.
Mm-hmm. I'll ask them if they want me to include that. So it's their choice. And in the very beginning of the coaching process, both I and the executive leader will let the abrasive leader know retaliation will not be tolerated. It's not okay to go to an employee or whoever, the names of people that you've given Bonnie, and to say, what did you say to Bonnie?
Mhm.
That's not okay.
Okay.
So that
I also assume you get a momentum shift too. Like, what comes to mind is sort of the Me Too movement, right? So the first few people that stand up, and they have to be really brave, and it's scary. But then all of a sudden, the people are like, the avalanche comes, and if it's the elephant in the room, then one person goes, yeah, it does smell, or yeah, it makes a lot of noise, and boom, people are like, okay, it's out there, and then it's hard for someone to say, well, it's their problem, it's their problem, it's their problem. They're out to get me. Well, no, if everyone's out to get you, maybe you're the common denominator here.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So
Yes.
Anna asks, Bonnie, do you have a recommendation for managing upwards? We talked a little bit about that, i.e. you have a boss who demeans you in public, for example. Any good reference material would be helpful.
I have some blogs on my website addressing that, bonnieartmanfox.com. I would also recommend Laura Crawshaw's first book, Managing Abrasive Leaders, and she does have, I don't know if that's the exact title, so please look that up. She does have a section about what can be done if you are an employee of an abrasive leader, and she talks about, similar to what was just mentioned, of being sure that if you complain, if you bring this up to the abrasive leader, that you are non-emotional, you focus on facts, you are very objective, so that you are not perceived as a complainer or as stirring up trouble, because that is sadly how it can be perceived, especially if the leader is a top performer and the employee is hesitant to intervene because they don't want to lose their expertise.
I guess another thing too is, as leaders, if you are a leader in an organization or you're mentoring people that will eventually become leaders, is put that out there, kind of going, hey, I want the feedback, saying to your underlings, your subordinates, whatever language we want to use, if you have an issue, I want you to approach me. And as long as it's done respectfully and with the right timing,
Yes.
I've said this many times when I've had leadership roles to people. I say, I have no problem with you telling me I'm an idiot, provided you're doing it politely, respectfully, in the right time, like in the right atmosphere. And it doesn't mean I'm going to change. but I want to be aware and I want to have a discussion, because I might say, nope, you're wrong. And this is the way we're doing it. Or I might say, I never thought of it that way. Thank you. And it opens up things. But as long as we can get that into people's head and they grow, then when they are leaders, they've created that culture and it becomes a systemic thing on the positive cycle.
Absolutely. And then that is as a leader, a positive role modeling of being aware of what's it like to be on the other side of me. And it's okay to tell me. Tara Urich, again, I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly. I believe her book is Insight, and she's done all this research about self-awareness. And at the end of the day, her research shows that people who are really only 10 to 15% self-aware. So that means the majority of us are 85% of us are not self-aware. And so to your point, Sanjay, that to ask, I have blind spots. If there's something I'm doing or that I don't realize, please tell me. And I may not, like you said, I may not agree with you, but I welcome your feedback.
I say that I have that conversation with my kids.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I have that conversation with my kids all the time. You can tell me if you think I'm doing something wrong. I'll have that conversation. It doesn't mean I'm going to change, but I'm open to the conversation. And sometimes I will change.
Yes, yes.
You say not self-aware. I like the term clueless.
One of the resources that I've provided is the Abrasive Leader Diagnostic. And this is an assessment that anybody can take. It's confidential. It's in the link here. It will be in the show notes. And it's a way of objectively answering questions to see if you are abrasive, or if you have an employee in mind who you would fill it out from that perspective. It will give you a several-page report, as well as some information about abrasive behavior.
And you also have a link to a PDF that outlines the 5 steps that we were talking about, right? There are 5 steps for managers to intervene. So take a look at those, not in the first post I posted. That was our show notes for us, but that doesn't matter. That now you've seen behind the scenes and questions, and but important that you look at those 2 resources, and they will be in the show notes as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bonnie, anything that we're wrapping up here, and as we do, I first of all, would you let people know how they can get your book if they're interested?
Thank you. Yes, it's at Amazon. And again, it's How Did My Family Get in My Office? It's a compilation of stories from real life leaders who shared in very transparent, vulnerable ways what it was like for them growing up, of how conflict was handled, how it impacted their conflict style as a leader, and what they did to transform their conflict style for the better.
Excellent.
And again, How Did My Family Get in My Office at Amazon? So thank you.
Yeah. Or they can get in touch with you. I gave them your website as well.
Thank you.
Bonnie, thank you so much for being with us. I know the other 2 guys will be envious that they couldn't be here to join us. By the way, that 15% self-awareness for the 4 of us rises to about 30%. I don't want to, but it's only because we let each other know every one of our flaws. So, but again, thank you so much for being here. And for everyone else, we'll see you in 2 weeks on every other Wednesday. Sanjay, any parting words from Kansas?
No, that's it. Other than thank you, Bonnie. I have a lot of ways to approach Jeff when I have a conversation with him. So thank you for that.
All
Absolutely.
Right. I have a calendar link, soswithbonnie.com. So you can also contact me, Sanjay, if you ever need some help with intervening with Jeff.
Perfect.
And she knows me too, so that's
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in 2
Thanks,
weeks.
Joe.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.